All right, guys, LOLz, and we have a returning guest today. It's none other than Nerdy Tenor, fresh off of his big DFS hockey championship win. We'll hear what he has been up to, maybe some thoughts on our sports betting conversation yesterday, maybe a little March Madness, maybe a little recap of the NBA contest that Brian was in last week, that Petteytheft took down. All of that today on LOLz.
Does he think? I think he thinks this. He thinks this is a go. Vegas Dave thinks this is a go.
Hot naked girls doing yoga.
What?
Why don't you just win like a man?
Random.org. Type in 1 for yes, 2 for no. Let the DFS gods pick for you.
And I'm absolutely begging you not to dupe us. Please don't dupe us.
Mr. Nerdy Tenor, broadcasting live from your post-apocalyptic bunker with a ping pong table. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing good. I mean, I don't think I'm doing as well as you. You know, you just took down 280,000 in the DraftKings hockey championship. So I think I could be doing better, but you seem to be doing tremendous.
Yeah, well, you know, I knew if I was going to get on LOLz again, I needed to up my game, you know, lacking Millie Maker. So my choices were either win the hockey championship or get the dirt bike as my Onyx gift. And, I'm not really a dirt bike kind of guy, as you might have gathered. So I just figured, you know, I'll just win the championship. You know.
There you go. And I'd like to think, Brian, that we only invited Nerdy on because he won, but you had booked him months back. And I think Nerdy just felt the pressure of needing to get a resume builder to justify the appearance.
That must have been it. I honestly, I didn't even know you played hockey.
Well, I just started this, so that's what's so funny, and I didn't mean to tilt anyone, but it's like I'm not even sure I'm that great at hockey. Like this is my first season playing, and the reason I got into it is partly I was looking for new games, but my VIP host said, "Hey, you know the hockey final is in Denver this year," and I live 10 miles away. So I'm like, oh, I'll try to get some seats, you know, maybe I get in and I get to bring some friends, and I won 3 seats. So I got to bring my cousin and his wife and my wife's 2 friends. So it was pretty fun. I got very lucky to win, of course. You have to in these things. And but I'm not even convinced my hockey stuff is that great. I think it's okay, but it has holes in it. But it's kind of ironic, you know, I've been to a baseball final and a golf final also. I think my stuff is quite a bit stronger in those, and I didn't get anywhere. So, you know, go figure.
Were you grinding the regular season? Like,
yeah, some of it, like half of it. Like, it's very, for people who don't play, it's very similar to baseball because you've got correlation between skaters and then negative correlation with the goalie. But it's a little bit messier because things do change a fair bit before games lock. Like lines change, injuries are not that rare, and it matters. So it's sort of a higher maintenance version of baseball with smaller prize pools. So
that's why I stopped playing it.
Yeah.
It was easily beatable when everything was easily beatable. So I'd be like, I'll just throw this in. If the line changes, I don't care. Like it'll affect, 15% of my lineups maybe. And I just catch the goalies, make sure you got your starting goalies in. That's about all I would do and then just play it like a simple correlated strategy. And back then you could still win a little bit, but then eventually it got too hard. And I'm like, I can't concentrate on NBA and this. And the prize pools kept getting smaller. I'm just like, not worth it.
That's the thing that was funny is this year they did the NBA final and the hockey final at the same hotel on the same weekend. And there was nobody who was in both. And I think you just said why. Like, if you're grinding NBA, like you can't do hockey. You can't do it. So you kind of have to pick one or the other.
Is there an element for you like where you truly enjoy it, or is it just I think there's an edge here and my ROI can actually be justified by the time commitment?
It's both. I wouldn't go after a game that was a slog just to get EV. Like, I like taking on new games and figuring stuff out. So, and also just at a meta level, when I take on a new game like hockey, like, even if I decide never to play hockey again, like there are things I learn along the way and processes I develop that can help me in other things. something very similar happened with MMA late swap, which we could talk about. Where I developed a whole thing for MMA late swap, which I thought was extremely strong, to the point where I told my wife and kid, I'm like, I'm going to be doing work on Saturdays as much as I possibly can, and I'll do less on other nights to make up for it, because I thought there was just such a huge edge for me there. And the week after I had that conversation, they switched it back, right? So, but I don't consider that wasted time, because some of what I wrote might be useful for other contexts. So, and it was fun. I find the process of writing the software is the fun part for me. Like trying to figure stuff out. The actual execution and sweating is less fun for me. So.
Is that the same for you, Brian? Building out the processes, is that what gets the juices going?
The execution, isn't really that fun. The like the hour before lock or the hour after lock. That's because it's like a lot of pressure, and you're trying to pay attention to like what's going on, what's happening, what are the changes I need to make, and not screw it up. Make sure all the dots are lined up.
Yeah, there's nothing fun about that.
It's not really fun.
It's all like negative. It's all, when something is a surprise, it's always a negative surprise. It's like, shit, I forgot to remove a guy who was out from my spreadsheet.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I did that the other day. Was I didn't change games to locked that were locked. And I'm like, why is this not fucking working? And then I had to go back to FC and just get some lineups in. And then afterwards, I'm like, oh my God, I didn't change these games to locked. And so it broke the whole thing.
Well, and I imagine too, an element like, sometimes it's just nice to have like a sanity check on stuff. And I feel like if you don't know the sport like super, super well, like if I see an NFL projection or like I have 80% of a guy, like I'm gonna be like, no, that's weird. But if I'm playing one of these sports I know nothing about, like if I am playing MMA, like, and I have 60% of someone, I'm like, I don't know, it seems fine. Like I bet it's hard too when you have the process set up to actually be able to pull back and be like, oh, something might be off here, and I don't know what input is actually skewing this.
No, that's right. And I've actually spent a fair amount of time, I should spend a lot more, addressing exactly what you described, like sprinkling on sanity checks that are like, are you aware this guy is projected for 10x salary today? Are you sure that's right? Or sometimes, depending on the sport, I'll pull from multiple projection sources and mix with my own. And if like there's a huge discrepancy, I'll try and flag those. Like a big thing will appear in my output. It's like, warning, this guy is like 50% off from this other projection, and then I can try and correct it. But it's never perfect. It's sort of like whack-a-mole, just trying to get rid of the most egregious and costly mistakes that occur with regularity, and then everything else is just sort of like, being flexible as it goes, right?
How was your ROI in hockey before winning the championship? I assume you were having a profitable year.
Actually, no. So it's funny that when I first started it, my stuff looked really good at the beginning. And then as it went on, it was clear that it wasn't that good. And I kept making a lot of improvements and changes. So if I hadn't entered any live finals ticket things, I would be a little bit negative, actually.
Okay.
So all my EV came from the tickets and the final itself. But
what's your kind of general strategy for live final qualifiers? Do you enter everything, specific sports, wait for a little overlay?
Well, so I was thinking about this, and the thing about live finals is you take a sport like DFS, which is already volatile as shit, and then you just ramp up the variance even more by having a multi-stage tournament where you can actually win a lot early and get less money than you put in. So it's an extremely risky dollar move. So my general philosophy is, if I'm doing well in a sport, I will start playing the qualifiers. But it's sort of like the first thing I remove if I'm not running well. So like, I'm not doing particularly great in golf so far, so I'm not entering the qualifiers right now, but that could change if I started to do well there. It's just, I think part of it is it's just bankroll management. It's just like the most volatile kind of contest. So that's the first thing I'm going to remove. if I'm not running well. But also, it's just like psychologically, it's like I want to be really sure I have in it more than any other kind of contest. I want to be pretty confident in my process if I'm going to play live finals, because it's just such a volatile sucker.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. The other thing is like you have to like enjoy travel and stuff like that, I think, because that's like kind of baked into the prize pool.
Right.
So I think what I do is like if there's looks like it might overlay and I'm like, oh, okay, I kind of just randomly enter them. I don't really enter them that frequently. What's this say here? I can't read it.
I was reading, I pulled up Nerdy's tweet, post-hoc analysis, averaging out the randomness in my lineup selection process. I had around a 6.1% chance of selecting the winning lineup with 3 entries. My average total ROI was -2%. It's good to be lucky.
Yeah. I mean, the reason I post it, and I'm my Twitter game's not very good. Like I'm sort of too vague and never give enough details, and then everyone gets confused. But the point is that like there's so much variance when you get to the final. I sort of think of these live finals very much like a multi-day poker tournament where like in the early stages there's quite a few bad players and everyone is just trying to hoover up all that EV, right, from the bad players. But then you get to day 3 or day 4, almost all of that EV is gone. And I feel like it just has to be the same way in fantasy qualifiers where winning the ticket is where all the EV is. But once you get to the final, even if you're like elite, you probably don't have that much of an edge on the field. There just aren't that many terrible lineups. Most of the players there are at least decent, if not very strong. So,
you know, another reservation I've not always had, but had that I think people should consider is, do you play small fields? Like pretty small, 100-man, 50-man, whatever. I don't even know how many were in the hockey one, but because 40, there you go. Because if you're playing 15,000, 100,000 man GPPs, and that's what you have your entire process set up for, and you get a ticket, you don't know, you're going to be playing 40 against the best players too. Do you have a strategy for that?
Right.
That you should at least consider when entering those live finals. I used to like almost never enter them before, but now it's kind of more just like I'll enter a few and try to see if I can get lucky. And it's more really about just trying to get lucky and be the champion for that year.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, which ones you do basketball?
I did baseball and basketball. I made the last few seasons. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just started entering the PGA ones too. I didn't even know they had one. They're like, I'll throw one in.
Yeah, ironically, so golf, when you're talking about golf main slates, like I'm pretty close. I'm just barely above breaking even on those. And I think the one exception might actually be the qualifier contests, like the big qualifiers for golf, I think are actually pretty plus EV, because I guess enough people are reaching for them, and they're essentially winner take all, which is it does weird things to your strategy too. So, but I agree, small field, like all of my process scales with contest size. So I have that, although I did have to make some changes for this one because I had 3 tickets out of 40, which was the most you could have. And that's such a huge percentage of the field that I was like, I have to tweak my process so that I have minimal correlation between my own lineups. Like, because just like you don't want to correlate with someone else, if you make up a huge portion of the field, you want to be damn sure you don't correlate with yourself either. So I actually coded up the day of the final some software just to like do that piece, which is something I should have done a long time ago. But like if you're doing 150 max and you have like a diverse set, like you don't have to think about it. It's just going to happen automatically.
Yeah. Well, you probably could make that even better too.
Maybe, yeah.
But I agree.
But it's weird to have 7.5% of the field. Like you can never do that except in this weird circumstance like this, right?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I like to.
Oh no, go ahead.
I like to think that kind of like portfolio management idea during the beginning of the football season, in Pete's world, like I think people were kind of saying, "Oh, it doesn't exist," like for best ball and stuff like that. And I'm like, no, it certainly does exist. And like a good way to kind of think of that is that like the 3-man cheaters. That's really kind of portfolio management strategy to take advantage. It's exactly. So it's like if that's true and you believe that, then you have to believe it for all the other examples too.
Yeah, imagine you could enter 2 out of the 3 entries, and 3. I mean, that's what they're doing basically when they're cheating, right?
Right.
And that's why it's such a huge advantage, right? So
Exactly. It's just blatantly obvious in that case, but it applies to a lesser degree in whatever the small fields, the large fields, the 150, 3 max, 20 max.
Right. Yeah. I think it's.
Go
ahead, Pete.
No, sorry. Go. No, go.
I was just going to say my intuition is right around. Like I basically don't worry about it. I did take a look to see if I could find anything weird in one sport. I won't mention small field like 10 mans, 15 mans, 8 mans. Didn't find anything obvious. Doesn't mean it wasn't happening, but I think right around 40 entries, I'm not worried at all anymore. I think that the benefit goes down obviously the more entries there are, and also there's just more eyes on it. Like it would become obvious more quickly. Also, I feel like if there's a lot of smart people in these high stakes, I think we would know if there's something explicit. That's what I hope.
I'm really just talking more about full field 20 max, 3 max, 150 max, and generally what do you put it? How are you putting those 150 in or whatever? Even if you can't gain an edge through some sort of portfolio manipulation, a lot of times you can minimize risk with very little to no cost to your EV. So why not do it? And it might even be giving you an edge. Who knows? But I don't think people are doing that at all. Like, or very rarely.
It seems like such a. Like, how do you get there? Like, that's how I'm going to get at. Like, I feel like there are so many other ways that kind of a person would get an edge first before they. You know what I mean? Like the advantage of having 300 lineups versus 150, I think, would come down entirely to the fact that you think your lineups are plus EV and you want to play a lot more of them, right?
I think we're talking past each other because you're talking about like 2 players playing together. I'm past that. I'm talking about just you as a non-cheating player should still think about portfolio management.
Sure.
And your inner line, which started your original point, inner line of correlation and things like that.
I think that becomes more and more important the more exploitative of a style you have, because like I have a fire hose of lineups that all are totally different from each other. So like I've actually done a little work, like what would it look like if I applied some diversity filter over the top and it was almost identical, like it was almost no difference. But if you're somebody who's like, I want to play these 3 teams out of 30 and just really hammer them, then I could totally see what you're saying being worth looking at, because you want to really be careful how you construct those, right? That's
a good point. I think it kind of goes without saying though, because everyone's playing exploitively, like except
but it's like
maybe.
Well, it's a question of degree too. Like if you're really hammering your takes, I guess is another way of putting it. Like, and there are players like this who I think are quite good that just like balls to the wall on a few takes. When you look at the lineup set, you're like, in that case, I would absolutely be spending time thinking about exactly what you're talking about. Like, how do I make these highly concentrated lineups as non-correlated as possible?
I think if you're using an optimizer, you're like by definition playing exploitively. If you're using just optimizer in someone's projections, and which is kind of like the age-old argument of like player pool size, kind of. I'm trying to think of like 2015 DFS talking points. And so like the guys would just play like a small player pool, and then they'd have 100% of one guy and 90% of another guy. They'd have no uniques, or anything like that, making their lineups different. And they'd be like, no, if you have an edge, you push it, and that kind of stuff. And it's like, no, not exactly. I don't think. And then like they would be at the top of the leaderboards. When they win, they take 1st, 3rd, 7th, 12, 15, and have a monster day. They're like, see, when it works, it really works.
Well, you see this in golf sometimes where people will just pick like 16 guys and mix and match. And when you go off, boy, do you really go off, right? Those do just clean up.
It's so top heavy. It seems like that's a mistake.
It seems you need a gigantic bankroll to do it that way, I think.
Yeah.
Brian, I was going to ask you how you think about that portfolio management idea also with, say, like a single slate of DFS exposure. Because one thing you've talked about is you run your stuff and say you have like a couple guys you have like 1% of and 2% of, and how you would often like chop that off, being like, if this guy hits, my larger portfolio of lineups probably isn't going to hit anyways. But couldn't you make the argument that if that was more of an intentional 1%, 2%, that was like, directly like not correlated with your heavy exposures, that could be helping you from a portfolio management perspective?
Well, my advice was, then maybe I can figure out the answer to that specific question. But my advice was, if you're doing like a optimizer and you style and approach the DFS, and you end up with some 1%ers at the end, and so like whatever, like LeBron is owned at 12%. Let's just say it's LeBron. And you have one lineup of your 150. I think it's fine if you're using that strategy. Just cut them off and add another lineup. And if you have like 4 or 5 of those guys, just cut them off and just shrink your player pool. But like the way I do it, which is like more the bottom up approach, there's probably a reason, I don't know why, that one LeBron lineup is worth entering. That's how I kind of see it. So I leave it. So you might see 1%ers in my player pool, but for some, and golf's so crazy, like maybe forget about golf, but like I'm thinking more NBA here. But for someone using FC, cut it off. And now, so you're saying, like, wouldn't that 1% add to this kind of whole negative inner lineup correlation portfolio strategy? And so, like, kind of, I guess, maybe, but like it's hard. I think it's easier in baseball because it's so obvious, like a pitcher versus the stack of the team it's facing. Yeah. And so you could build some, way less risky portfolios in baseball than in NBA. But NBA still has some correlation, and they all have some correlation in the game DFS because we're playing against each other, and like Nerdy might have a lot of them, and a bunch of other guys might have a lot of them, and so like this lineup will go up when this lineup goes down, just because of the nature of DFS and
there's a funny way in which other people's increased variance style of play increases my variance too. So sometimes, there'll be a lobby full of $200 satellites. Like it's like $176 and the prize is a $2,000 ticket to like the major golf, let's say. Okay. So there's like 10 of these and they're like 14 mans or something. So like I'll enter all 10 of them and I'll run my random selection part separately on each one. So I'll have a different lineup in each one. But then the guy who wins ran the same lineup in all of them. So it doesn't freaking matter how diverse I was because he crushed it, and he crushed it in all of them, right? So I had zero chance to win. It didn't matter what I did, right? Because he got to a lineup I was never going to get to. So it can be the case that your opponents can screw with your own variance, right?
And we're guessing. We're still guessing, is what's going to happen, what everyone else is going to do. And over time, though, hopefully, your strategy there would like actually work out sometimes.
Right. But you're not as diverse as you think you are, I guess, often because of that. Like if there are a bunch of competitive players who, if you look at their lineups, they basically run a 150 set, and they run basically a subset of that in each of the smaller contests. So like they run 150 max in one, and then they run what they think the best are in the 40 max, and then they take, on down the line. And if they win, there's a good chance they win all of them. And like, so I always used to tell myself, I'm diversifying even in the same slate. It's different contests with different payout structures, and different strategies for all of that. Well, that all goes out the window if one guy just sweeps all of them. So there's a limit to how much diversification will get you in that kind of a situation. Yeah,
definitely.
I wanted to hit our guy Jacob wanted to get super in the weeds on your hockey lineup. He says, "Why did you play Burns against the opposing goalie given the negative correlation?" I assume this wasn't a hand-built lineup, but do you know the thought process behind this?
The thought process is I don't have a thought process, and everything I generate comes out of some computer program I wrote. So either my process thought it wasn't a big deal. Well, it did, I guess. Whether that's correct or not is another story. So, like, a lot of people that I talk to in the live final, they tend to give me a little too much credit in the sense that they hear about the way I do things and think it's all kind of magic. But the truth of the matter is, and Brick knows this, it's only as good as the models, right? And for hockey, my models are pretty far from where I'd like them to be. So it could definitely be the case that play was a mistake. That would not be surprising to me. However, just, random opinion, the smaller the field is, the less you probably care about these kinds of small correlation effects. It is negatively correlated, but it's not nearly as much as baseball. Goalies in hockey are just like defenses in football. They're just completely random. Because you can have a goalie who has wins the game and has very few saves, and then you have a goalie that loses the game but has a ton of saves and a ton of points. So it's a little weird that way. But the long and short of it is, I don't know why it did that, and it could be bad.
The huge point you already said. There's a big difference between a 40-man field and you're trying to hit a 1 in 40,000 lineup. Yeah. Where you probably don't want any correlation. And so, like, at the beginning of the football season, I was getting more defense versus player lineups than I wanted. Like, I would be fine with if it popped up every now and again, I'd be like, okay, maybe that's probably right. But it was popping up in 10 out of the 150 or maybe even more. I can't remember. So instead of redoing everything, I just go 0 allow versus DVP. It takes a little longer to do it. I don't care.
Zero it out, yeah. So
zero it out.
That's pretty funny. I think for hockey, large field, on an ordinary size slate with 7 games, it'll play a goalie against a skater a couple % of the time. So it seemed pretty close to marginal in a large field. So
Burns seems like a mistake to me. I don't know. Burns is a high scoring defender. I mean, I don't know. I'm just I haven't played hockey in a while, but I can understand your 3,500 guy defender against goalie and not a guy who might get 2 goals and 2 assists. I don't know.
I don't know either.
But I mean, it could be right.
Well, but to your point too, Brian, about the football stuff and the defense against offense, there is a situation where when the field is going out of their way to avoid those negative correlations, is that offset by no one else using it? You probably know that no one else is going to run out that same pairing, which will naturally make your lineup unique.
And maybe get you to combos you couldn't get to without that defense.
Yeah.
That's whatever, 1,000 cheaper or something, and no one's playing them. I mean, it's telling you that for a reason. But you can also screw up and something might be wrong in there. And so
I know I'm missing a lot with hockey. It's quite coarse what I have there. But there's a lot. There are the things I know I'm missing, and then there's things I'm missing I don't even know I'm missing yet because, so it's just random who wins these kind of finals.
Why hockey instead of NBA if you're going to spend your nights worrying about
it's still more civilized than NBA. It's less time usually. There's less playable slates per week in hockey than in basketball, so it's sort of naturally limiting just how much of a degen I want to be. But I also thought it was the fact that it had similarities to baseball intrigued me, which is why. Let's have a look at this.
I played once this year. The one day there was no other sports except hockey. I won 2K and I'm done. That's on plus EV hockey player this year.
Wow, dined and dashed it.
No.
What What was the actual live sweat experience like? You said you had lots of family and friends there with you. Like, when did you know you had a shot at this? What was the environment like?
Well, so I'll back it up the night before. So I sweated the basketball final with my cousin and his wife. They're older than me. So, and my cousin's wife was super into the sweat, like watching the leaderboard. She was like figuring out who won, and then it couldn't have been scripted better for the basketball. It went into overtime and like completely changed everything. And then, so she got super into it, which was fun. Then I had to explain to them, I'm like, whatever you see on the hockey leaderboard, it means nothing, because a single goal and all 7 of the people on the leaderboard will disappear and be gone from the leaderboard, perhaps never to be seen again. Because I was like, basketball, it's a game of inches. It's like a few points at a time, slowly climbing up, right? So I tell them this, right? And then, so I decide to run my lineups at home. Lock is at 5. So I'm here at home right up until lock, just in case. And there's no late swap. That's how they do these finals. We should talk about that in a second. But so I hop in the cab with my wife, and we head over to the view party in Denver, right? So I walk in, and 2 of my 3 lineups are on the leaderboard already. I think one was in first and one was in 6th or something. So, I give them this talk about, like, it doesn't really mean anything yet. And the lineup I actually won with was basically a stack of 4 with a bunch of one-offs. And the stack of 4 was in the late game, so I had no idea about those. But, like, all my one-offs were doing well. And then my goalie crushed, and there was only one other person with the same goalie. So I knew I had a strong lineup going into the second set of games. So there 3 games started at 5, and there were 3 games that started 7 and 7:30 and another 7:30, I think. So I knew I had a pretty strong contender, and then I stacked it well. But the thing is, it's just a huge negative sweat at that point, because there was someone in second who had all of my remaining players and 2 more, and he was down by 16 points, and there were like 40 minutes of player minutes left for him. So I'm just pacing, trying not to look at the leaderboard. I go to the bathroom. I play some bar games. I try Top Golf for a little bit, but I found it quite nerve-wracking. I don't really enjoy that part of the game at all. Especially when you're ahead early, like then it just feels like it's just a negative free roll in a way. Like much better to not think you have a chance and then win. But somehow I held on. But I mean, at that point, I told the people with me, I'm like, I think I'm like a favorite, but not a very big one, like maybe 60-40 to win. So
was your 4 stack with a goalie or defender?
No, it had a defender in it.
Defender in it,
I think,
with a bunch of one-offs.
Yeah.
At what point in the evening did you allow yourself to like exhale and say, I got this? Or was it not until the scoreboard said 0-0 on it?
It was so my wife, who had to go through heroics all weekend because of, we have a son who's a musician, and he had like multiple rehearsals. She's like coming back and forth from all these events. So Sunday, she's like, I'm going to come for a bit and then I'm going to go home. So I waited for 0-0 before I texted her that I won. That was the rule.
Yeah.
But at one point it was 100% clear I was getting first or second. And then I just had to have some self-talk. I'm like, it's fine. Like, worst case scenario, 100K. So, yeah, it was pretty crazy. And really, it's so many nice people come to these things. Like, the fantasy community, there's just so many good people in it. It's much friendlier than the poker community, I find. I don't know if you think that's true, Brian, but it's more like the D-bag quotient seems lower in fantasy than it is in poker. There's plenty of good people in poker too. It's just I don't know. I just be hypersensitive to that.
Maybe, I don't know.
I was talking to somebody there. He agreed with me. He's like, he thought it was because it's not so personal. Like poker, it's like I won chip from this guy, whereas tournament, it doesn't really feel like that.
You tricked me.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So
Isn't there also probably an element too with the poker, like say the poker tournament circuit, people out there, they're seeing each other all the time. They're all showing up to these same tournaments. It reminds me of like stand-ups at an open mic. It's they all see each other at the same open mic. They just want to like be in front of a crowd, but they have to listen to each other, do the same material. They're all just angry. At least with DFS, it's like you guys are all at home all the time. And now you're coming together for the first time. And it feels more like a once-a-year summer camp than like your adversary that you see every week.
Yeah, I think that's true too. You get sort of cliques and friend groups in the poker tournament scene. But there are some really excellent humans in the poker tournament world, but there's some scumbags too.
I've never seen it. No, I'm kidding. I think there's also this element of you're not in control. In poker, you really feel like you're making the decisions. Where like if Chris Paul has a great game, I won, but like I didn't make those shots. I was lucky that he had a really good game, and so you could kind of like let it go a little more.
I think that's true. I think poker is a real ego test. Like people have problems around ego. That is just a crucible for that. Like looking dumb in front of people, like losing to people, all of that stuff pushes a lot of people's buttons, to be sure. And you can just sort of hide in fantasy, right?
That might just be a human test. I mean, who wants to look bad in front of people?
That's true. But,
Pete here wants to know, what is your poker history background? I can't remember if we talked about this last time you were on the show or not.
Not much. Almost all of the interesting poker stuff I've done is writing poker software, so writing pro poker tools, and I've done a lot of custom work for some pros. Some of it public, some of it not. As a player, I played small stakes forever. Like, this is in the 2000s, but like sit down and, buy in for a couple $100 kind of stuff. When I moved out here in Colorado, I went to the casino to look for a game. And then by this point, I had spent enough time working for a lot of pros in various projects that I kind of learned a fair bit of stuff by osmosis, but I never play at an elite level. But I looked at this 30-60 limit holder game. I'm like, this game doesn't look too tough. And so I play 30-60 limit about once a month. I'll be playing this weekend because both my wife and my son will be out of town. So I'm going to be at the tables for quite a bit this week.
What is that, Blackhawk, or where do you go?
Yeah, Blackhawk's about 40 minutes from my house. So not too
limit
bad.
poker.
Just enough to keep me out of trouble.
Yeah,
I think I'd rather watch paint dry, than play limit poker.
I think No Limit is worse. It's No Limit Live is so dull, I find. At least limit, you get tons of hands in. It's so quick.
Yeah, I'm not going to defend No Limit either, but
I think No Limit Tournament is better.
What is nerdy like at the 30-60 limit? Are you like sucking back adult beverages? Are you just like dialed in? Are you trying to soul read your opponents? Are you just like a robot just getting in as many hands? Like, what is that experience like for you?
I do drink a fair bit at the table. I try to have fun. I probably bore people when I talk too much. I'm that guy probably a little too often.
I would never have guessed you to be like a chatterbox at the table.
I can be, but I don't know. I fun table. I like, I'm not going out to play to make money, right? That's not my motivation for playing. But when I play, I'm trying to win as much as I can, if that makes sense. You know what I'm saying? So I'm not table selecting, but when I'm in the game, I'm trying to win with all the tools at my disposal, right? Mm-hmm. So I'll sit down in a shitty game that's got like 6 good regulars, 2 pros, and 1 mediocre person, and play, even though I'm probably losing to the rake. I find the game fun. I'm not trying to do soul reads on people. I'm more trying not to give off reads myself more than anything else. More defensive that way.
What's the lifestyle of a 30-60 limit poker pro? Live poker pro. What do they make, like $37,000 a year?
I haven't really thought about it. I assume they're doing multiple things because the thing is, we recently changed the rules in Colorado. So it used to be the max bet in any casino game was $100 period, which meant that 50-100 limit was the biggest game, and no limit was basically capped, or it just got stupid, right? If
$1-2 maybe.
Right. So I think we did 1-2 and 2-5. So they got rid of that law, and so all these big no limit games are starting. There's a 10 and 25 game fairly regularly. So most of the limit action has dried up quite a bit. So
people don't remember back in the early days of poker, that's all you could play was limit. That's all they had at the boats. And it, man, it was brutal. You know, the guy I always hated was the guy wearing sunglasses, right? In a 10, you know, a 5-10 limit hold'em game, 10-20, because there was barely any stakes higher than that around here. And they would try to get reads. They'd try to get reads off you. Bluffing, right? Bluff reads in limit 5-10, 10-20, you know, just like eyeing you up, right? Like the early ESPN days. It's like, we're not playing big bet poker, fucker. Just call, hurry up.
I had the same thing because when in college, my buddies and I would go to the Indian casinos around San Diego. In the biggest game, most action was 3-6 limit. And I'd sit down with 20 big blinds. Like the game was bigger than what my bankroll as a freshman in college would allow for. But It was just so fucking fun. Like 3-6 felt like the thrill of no limit when you're playing outside of your bankroll.
It was still fun.
Sure. Yeah. It's funny. Sometimes I play a little too slow, but that's like when I'm like, hey, am I giving up timing tells? But in that case, it's like I count to 3 and then act. It's like
okay.
That's like about as much as I'm comfortable stalling without being a jerk in limit.
What is it about you specifically mentioned this 30-60 game of you thinking there was an edge there? What about that game stood out to you?
Oh, it's very simple. Limit hold'em is so simple. Almost all of the edge comes from people playing too many hands pre-flop. That's it. There's so many hands so quickly. It's very hard to overcome that mistake. It's really most of it. They're playing. Most of those players who are bad are also calling stations, and being a calling station is actually not much of a mistake when the pots are big. And limit, right? It's if it is a mistake, it's usually a small one. So all of their mistakes are concentrated in just getting too much money in early. So
that's why the spending time on tells is so dumb, because the mistakes you make by reading someone wrong, you blow a huge pot proportional to the small limit to call at that point. It's just so dumb. You're wasting everyone's time, fella.
I've had this happen many times, being sort of older and boring looking, where people underestimate my ability to make a bluff. So if I see somebody who I don't recognize, I up my bluff frequency. People I play with before know that I'm not a tight, passive old white dude. But people who don't know me might assume that. So I have taken advantage of that a few times.
How does Skalansky's pre-flop limit rank by position whatever rankings, you should play this from here and this from here? How do they hold up?
I haven't looked in a long time. I can tell you in broad strokes what's changed. If you look at the computer outputs, I actually looked at my own outputs. If you look at multi-way limit hold'em outputs, they play a little less high card strength and a little more suited hands, very broadly speaking. So like, if a position used to say play 10-8 offsuit, it might get rid of that hand, but it might add like 8-7 suited and 7-6 suited. That's sort of the very rough trend from the solvers. Which is what everyone kind of thought anyways. Yeah, it's pretty close. I mean, the thing is, you could sit down at one of these games having mastered books written 15 years ago and be a favorite. You don't need the latest, greatest to be good at these games. So.
But then you have to talk to them and be around them.
You have to like people, Brian.
Watch them eye you up for bluffs.
Yeah. It's funny because you two, like on paper, you would think would be pretty similar DFS Simbros, but Nerdy going to live finals, sweating the games, going to play live action poker. I mean, these are all things that Brian would absolutely hate to do.
Depends on the company.
I'm still disappointed in you, Brian. Like, why you got to go out to the NBA basketball?
You should
final.
go.
Denver, you could have gotten drinks with Nerdy. You guys could have had a nice night.
I tweeted out, I refuse to contribute to global warming by taking a plane to that live final. Okay.
That's fair.
Otherwise, I would have. I'm sorry. It's just, I just care that much more than you guys. Okay.
Yeah.
We do got to give a shout out to Petteytheft for taking down the DraftKings championship. Another cool Millie. That guy, talk about a guy who earns his keep on this show. My God, what a heater.
Amazing.
And in that way, like I wasn't following very closely, but I don't think he was even in the top 7 before the overtime hit. I think I have that right. So needed the overtime to happen, I think.
I stopped watching when I was personally out of it.
Fair enough. Yeah, it was really loud in the area when the overtime became clear that
believe it or not, Raging Phillip too has had. I know he didn't win the Millie there, but he's just had a monster year. He wins every other day. It's amazing.
Look, it's the mystery man Oxenduck in third there.
That's right. He did respond to me the other day. Actually, I DM'd him see if he wanted to come on. He said,
"What was the response? Fuck off."
It was like in that alien squid language, where he
put his hands on the glass.
Yeah, couldn't understand it. I'm like, I guess that's a no.
Yeah. I am noticing a theme between our two, live final winners and their tweets. They both say they got lucky. What is it with you guys? Say you got lucky when you win these big prizes?
Well, I think that's targeted at people who maybe don't live in this space like we do, but are enthusiasts and maybe discouraged. Like, I mean, we all know, like, what happens in one contest is just completely freaking random. Like, it means like nothing. It means totally nothing at all. It's what happens over many slates that matters, and it's just. I was hoping that would be encouraging to people who are discouraged.
See, I think I understand why you guys do it, but I will tell you, for the average person who doesn't win a lot of DFS, it's the equivalent of when the hot chick says, "I'm such a nerd." It's very so. I got lucky.
I was going to say, yeah.
The reason think they're a nerd. Yeah.
I will say, I think my general process is very strong. I'm not claiming otherwise, but what happens in any one slate really is just luck.
I was going to say, I do it so I appear humble, but yet everyone still knows.
Yeah, you get credit for
That's
being
not
humble,
really what I mean.
but also you get the admiration of your peers.
I'm just successful and humble. Okay, guys?
Right.
That's why I say it.
I revealed enough on this show your internal monologues when anyone wins at DFS other than you, and it's like, this fucking luck box. How does
when you win, it's lucky. When I win, it's all skill.
Yeah.
For me, it's like if I keep saying the same names, I'm like, God damn it, this fucking guy again. It's not even like.
If Petty didn't come on the show 100 times, his name's starting to creep up there, Petty. I've got to tell you, you win a lot.
All right, Brian, that just settles it. When you win one of these, big tournaments or live finals, your tweet needs to be, it feels great to be the best and be rewarded like the best. I think something like that.
I'll definitely tweet that. Yeah.
So Pete, the thing I've been screwing around is more up your alley lately. I've been putzing around in the low-level golf Reignmakers area.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I actually haven't been big into Reignmakers, but yes, the intersection of NFTs and sports, I'm always interested in it. Tell me about your exploration of it, because from what I've heard, that golf is the best vehicle for Reignmakers as far as the sports.
Yeah, I think from a game perspective, that's exactly right, because like you can sell a bunch of cards at the beginning of the season. They're basically good the whole season. The good plays, the best golfers remain the best golfers. Like, it's not like football where it's week to week which guys you want to play and which are valuable. And I think the game is really fascinating to combine, a collectible trading card market with DFS. I think that's really cool from a game perspective, because now instead of, lineups and ownership, it's more like, what is the expected value of this lineup compared to how much it costs to assemble this lineup, which is completely upends a lot of things we take for granted in DFS. Like in conventional DFS, you often hear people say, in a GPP, you got to be aiming for first because so much of the money is in the top equity spots. If you're playing to min cash, you're a losing player. And that's excellent advice. But that goes out the window with something like Reignmakers. You could have a lineup that has 0 shot at winning, that's plus EV, if it's cheap enough and a min cash is often enough, right? It's just completely different. So I spent a few weeks putzing around in the MMA version, and then I have some golf. So I'm just like slumming it in the lowest 2 tiers. So I bought a whole collection of very cheap cards, and I'll just be playing around with that for the foreseeable future. Now, as a game in which you want to make serious money at, I'm more skeptical. I don't know if that's really a thing. It's a pain in the ass, first of all, to set all your lineups. There's no CSV because all of your cards have different edition numbers. They don't support that. It's like inventory management. And you're going to be playing the marketplace, trying to get cards at the right price. So I think if you're doing this to make serious money, I think it would be a gigantic pain in the ass. And then there's the whole tax implications are also a little complicated. I don't know if you saw any of this, but in fantasy, you pay $100 to enter a contest, you win $200. Your tax form says you won $100. In Reignmakers, you have 2 separate things. You've got your winnings from the contest, and then you've got the marketplace. And you could conceivably get a tax statement saying you won a bunch of money, even though you lost money, and are going to have to figure out, not tax advice, but if you're putting serious money into this, I would figure all this shit out. Like before you get into it, because it's complicated actually.
When you're calculating like the EV of a lineup and acquiring the cards for a lineup, are you factoring in any collectible long-term value or just strictly the utility element of it in the contest this season?
So what I've done so far is even simpler than that. Basically, I try to compute a couple things. First, I try to figure out what the cards should be worth for this contest, disregarding any other value, just what they're worth in this contest. Like a contest is going to have 4,000 people. How much is, John Rahm worth in this contest? And then I've sort of been using that and combining that with other custom stuff. And then I feed it my inventory and it assembles a bunch of lineups for me. But to your point, like predicting the future value of cards and how they're going to change is actually a big part of the game, especially for something like MMA, where like the number of fights is unclear and who the fighters are going to be fighting against. Like, I think if you wanted to do that at a high level, you better understand all that stuff, because so much of the EV is going to be like making moves based on those trades. I think it's a little less fiddly with golf. Like the best golfers are just more expensive and generally in the way you would expect, right? There's probably some week-to-week stuff, but not huge.
What would have happened if I was just thinking if they had rolled this out like before Live and you had like sunk all this money in DeChambeau, like, yeah, and all of a sudden it's just like they're not eligible. Like that would have felt like a rug.
I mean, that might happen. John Rahm signs with Live.
Yeah. Well, a lot of these golf cards that they rolled out, I feel like a few of them actually had retired golfers. So you could like pull a golfer that had literally zero utility except to be burned in the next season.
There's something about in the modern gambling world, whatever we want to call this, with technology, that's like a lot different than the allure of it when I was a kid. That more of a wild west. You get in there, you boots on the ground, and you play a game against someone else. It's more like boutique style like that, where I kind of like that. Our kind of strategies, like Nerdy, like won't work really, and you just kind of have to get in there and gamble. I kind of like that, but if they did want to change it, A way I think they could kind of do that is I upload 150 lineups, 200 lineups, whatever, via CSV, and then each next to them they have a buy all and how much it costs.
Oh, uh-huh.
That's cool.
Yeah, interesting.
And so I just go, oh, this is my 100, this is my 50th best lineup, and it costs $50. Buy all, and enter, right? And I just each week, and it's like, okay, the top lineup costs 10 grand, and the first prize is 25 grand. Fuck that. You just go down and just select your lineups, and then that would also fuel the resale market,
the marketplace. Yeah,
because they're just buying really quickly. Like, you want these? Here's the cheapest price. Click. There's your lineup for the week.
Yeah, that's a really good idea. That brings up the other caveat I have, in addition to the taxes and the pain in the ass factor, if you're really trying to make money, is like DraftKings is just changing shit left and right. Like, the ground is very unsteady, so that should give people pause as well, who are really trying to fire. I just
said this. I have a pet peeve word when people say more. And I'm going to use that right now. Say more. What do you mean? Like,
you just speak on that.
I mean, it's just,
can you speak more on it?
Looking at what they did with Reignmakers, like it's just like they say one thing and do another in terms of what their policy is when certain things happen, and which sets will be released, and when they'll have the feature, and that. It's all very much in flux. So,
well, and this is nothing new to like NFT gaming. I mean, like Top Shot. I mean, they've been building the plane as they go along. And like, part of you wants to sympathize in that they are forging like new territory. Like, this is a new game type, new experience. They're listening to feedback, they're tweaking all this stuff. But on the other hand, people are sinking legitimate amount of capital into these games, assuming they're playing under one set of rules, and then the path gets deviated on a moment's notice.
Yeah, this is why, among other reasons, I gave myself a pretty strict budget for all this stuff. It's sort of a screw around budget.
I thought when you said that there's these issues, I thought we were gonna get some intel from like Nerdy did some singing gig, and it just so happened that some financial insider worked at oversight of SVB Bank and all these things. Like, hey, just so you know, DraftKings has their money at so and so bank, and they're not looking too hot. And we were going to get some like super fucking hot intel right here, where we all just cash out as we can.
Someone messaged me. They're like, "Do you know where DraftKings keeps their money?" And I'm like, oh, shit, should I be worried about that?
I tweeted that out. Yeah.
And then I looked at the holding company, and you can't really see exactly what they're doing. DraftKings does have a separate company where they hold all
their headquarters is in the same building as SVB.
That's why this person sent me. They're like, I just saw this notice put up.
It's the same person. It's the same person.
There it is. Yeah, we won't say who it is. But I'm like,
the same person emailed us. Yeah.
Probably
on the PGA. Like, are you getting any like pack rip sweat equity? Like, do you get a high from opening them and see what you got? Or are you just like ripping?
I'm like a bottom feeder, so I bought like 200. I spent like a few grand on the absolute cheapest packs you can open. So it's just like large numbers of cheap cards for me. So I don't have any.
Is this comment right?
What do you got?
The last one. Do they expire?
I think so. Yeah, I think they're playable for the year. I think that's right. And then you can claw back some tiny amount of their value through some burn mechanic, but it'll be a small percentage.
You don't lose the NFT.
No, you can keep it if you want.
They just won't have. Basically, they use the pack proceeds to fuel the prize pools, and so once that money has been spent, they can't come up with liquidity to provide for tournament prizes because it would be a losing endeavor for them. That way.
I like the fact. I always thought like that these cards. Who knows? Eventually, you can get lucky, and this card's worth 10 grand 10 years from now or something. Like as a collectible. I always thought like that would be the cool thing. And like maybe you could only play these cards, legacy cards from these years in new tournaments and stuff like that.
I think they're doing some legacy something for football, I think. I was not in the football streets at all, so I might be wrong about that.
I think for that to happen long term, like you'd need a few things to happen. You'd need one, Reignmakers to become like the most popular fantasy game like out there, and you would need DraftKings to continue to devote some resources to rewarding legacy sets to where people have that in their head. Oh, I want to continue to hold on with this because DraftKings might have a really special contest for this eventually.
Yeah, I'd be surprised, but I, you know.
Yeah.
Well, Nerdy, it's always great catching up with you around the LOLz streets, and sounds like you're having a nice little spring here, and you know, dabbling in everything. 30-60, limit hold'em, Reignmakers. I mean,
I'm
what a
easily
renaissance,
bored.
man.
Easily bored.
It's it seems though you do have the gambling gene within you, not just stats.
Here's one for you. What as a musician, what were your thoughts on Tar? That feels like that movie would have been right up your alley.
I thought it was tremendous. I tell you, so I went to see that with my wife, who is a full-time professional musician, and Kate Blanchett is unbelievable in this movie.
Yeah.
That is, you know, anytime you see a movie in your area of expertise, it's usually there's going to be some cringy moments, you know,
right,
where they don't quite get it right. She's amazingly good at, like, there were times I legitimately thought I was looking at a conductor. The art peeks through a couple little subtle places, but I thought it was an incredible, just on that level, it was amazing to see how good of a job she did and the whole cast with that. And I thought it was a really good movie. Very complicated, social commentary in there about a lot. I thought it was really, really good. Did you see it?
I did. Yeah. I thought it was a little bloated for how long, but Kate Blanchett was just incredible in it. Yeah.
He's a beast. Unbelievable.
Well, I was curious about your thought for what you just said too, like how close to the reality of that world was it? It sounds like they nailed it.
Well, I mean, I've seen plenty of movies featuring musicians, and like sometimes you're like, couldn't they have hired a consultant for like just like a half an hour to like show them how to move more? You know, you see stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But plus, she did all the language stuff. I guess this was the first time she'd spoken German at all.
That's crazy.
I mean, she didn't need to be a native speaker, but I thought that was super impressive as well. The fluency of her performance was something else. Yeah, highly recommend.
There you go. Brian, anything else on your neck of the woods? Didn't get time to touch on March Madness here, but what's going on?
Well, I don't know if we have any time left, but the Sports Handle, you guys know the website Sports Handle, they talk about sports betting and stuff. They it's more sports betting specific than DFS. They have like legislative updates in your state, you know, those like a map of all the, like, you guys probably have went there over. Anyways, one of the writers there watched our show last week and DM'd me, and they're writing an article about a topic last week. Yeah. And so he goes, "Can I talk to you?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure." And then like after 5 minutes, I'm like, "Wait a second, I need content on my channel." I'm like, "Can we record our conversation just so I have, so I could put this up on my YouTube channel?" And he agreed. And cool. So we chatted for an hour, and he's going to write an article the next couple of days. And then I'm going to put it on YouTube.
Awesome. We'll be looking forward to that. Yeah. For people who didn't watch last week, we had Captain Jack Andrews from Unabated, and had like a debate about kind of like some of the morals and legislative issues around, problem gaming and how that should be handled or not handled on the state level. So definitely check that out. Did you have any thoughts on that conversation, Nerdy? I don't know if you got to catch it.
I'd be commenting as a rank amateur. I mean, it's interesting to me. The issue of problem gambling on a personal level, like, I could convince myself like it's not my problem, and I think that's mostly right. But also every once in a while, I'll throw a little bit of money at a charity that helps with addiction issues, because it's impossible in fantasy to know who you're playing against and which small percentage of players I'd rather not take their money from them. So it's just a small gesture, I guess. Maybe it's just guilt reduction. I don't know, and I'm kidding myself, but I'll throw a few $100 in that direction. Most of my charity money is in other things, but a little bit.
Yeah.
I only donate to pro addiction charities, so I counteract your charitable giving. So don't feel too good.
We should just both stop what we're doing and pocket the money then.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying.
Well, yeah. Well, everyone, stay tuned for LOLz's glow up in this upcoming article. Appreciate all of you hanging out in the chat. Brian, do we have any MMA ownership projection stuff coming this weekend on bet75.com?
Yeah, I will be extremely hungover. I'm having people over for March Madness tomorrow.
Oh, wow.
And they're coming over at 11 a.m.
Oh my God.
That's an early start. That's a real early
and
start.
lock is at noon. So if there's a slate I'm going to miss, it would be this one. But I mean, I usually wake up at like 7 a.m. So I'm assuming I can still wake up at 9 or something. 10.
All right. The sweat is on.
Maybe I'll
appreciate.
No.
All right, we'll see what Brian can pull together in his hungover state. But everyone, follow Nerdy Tenor on Twitter. Check out the audio feed. We'll get that up as usual after the show, and we will be back as usual every single Thursday afternoon at 1:30 p.m. Eastern. Have a lovely week. Enjoy the tournament. We'll see you guys next time.